everyone. Okay. So when I was 23, I moved back home with my parents for grad school. And one weekend, I was sitting in my room studying when both my parents uncharacteristically walked in together, sat on my bed in unison, and just stared at me intently. I looked at them and said, "Hi, Mom and Dad." And my mom says, "Shalini, it is time for you to get serious about finding a life partner." Okay. Well, how do you presume that I should do that? Well, your dad and I, we were just looking in the Indian newspaper and we found an advertisement for an Indian matrimonial conference. We think you need to go. Okay, so in case you didn't hear that, she said Indian matrimonial conference. So that's weird, right? But what's even more awkward is that my parents and I, who are Indian, we never talked about boys, about dating, about sex. In fact, growing up, my brothers and I weren't even allowed to watch the Discovery Channel on the off chance we'd see two animals procreating. So this was a big moment for us. And so I asked my mom, I said, "So what is the matrimonial conference going to involve?" And she said, "Well, I don't know, but you need to go." So it wasn't the most persuasive argument. But I managed to find out that the event was going to be held in this region known as Little India, otherwise known as New Jersey. Yeah. So there was that. And so my parents and I, we went back and forth about this for days, and I don't know what it was. Maybe it was because they were the only ones I was talking to about this, but I started to think, what do I have to lose? I mean, I date men of all ethnicities, but what if my Indian prince is going to be there? Could I really afford not to go? Okay, so I think I need to lower this. Okay, so what if, and I've been to plenty of professional conferences. So I'll just go to a few symposiums, shake a few hands, and if it's totally lame, I'll grab a few drinks at the bar and call it a night. So it was set. I was heading off to the Garden State with my father in tow and ready for whatever the hell I was getting into. So the day of the event, any sort of reassurances I had about drinking at the bar were completely squashed when I found out the event was being held in a Hindu temple where alcohol is completely forbidden. But I'm proud to say I just kept moving forward. And I went to the temple, and I went up to the conference registration desk. There's a registration desk. And I was given a packet of 3 items. And so the first item was a name tag, and it just had the numbers 273 on it. Because I was candidate number 273, my name wasn't on the name tag. The second item was a published manual that said Book of Candidates, and it had profiles of all 450 candidates that were going to be at this event. And the third item was a little box of Tic Tacs. I'm going to let you sit with that for a while. You good? Okay. Moving on. So then I go to this main hall, which is like this huge ballroom. And on one side is this large stage. In front of that is this sea of round tables where all the candidates were sitting. And behind that were rows and rows of chairs where the parents were sitting. They were very much involved, and my dad was front and center. So I got my assigned seating, and it wasn't long before I found out what was in store. So they were taking 50 of us backstage, and one by one, candidates of every gender were making the long trek to the microphone in the middle of the stage, one by one, by the way, and saying their candidate number, their name, their degree, and where they lived. Come to think of it, it's not very different from dating in DC. It's very same. Yeah. So as each candidate made their way across the stage, what I noticed was everyone around me, especially the parents, were making these furious notes by every profile. And I kind of got into it too, because how are you going to keep track of everyone? And so I started off with like, what did I start off with? Red sweater. And then there was cowlick hair. And then there was the Indian Bill Clinton, of course. And then there was the, hell no, would totally crush with my body weight. Just notes to make me aware of what would be a match. And it was all fun and games until it was my turn. And as I waited backstage with my cohort of 50, I got increasingly nervous as the line got shorter and I got closer to the stage. And when I was about 2 people away from the front, I see this figure running towards me. And I look over, and it's my father. And he says, Shalini, Shalini, say something funny so you stand out. And I look at him, and I'm like, what do I say? And he says, and he thinks for a second, he goes, say something about the huge UK game tonight. So, we are from Kentucky, and my dad is a huge University of Kentucky basketball fan. Thank you. Okay, that's awesome. But what my dad doesn't realize is that outside of the state of Kentucky, especially in a Hindu temple in New Jersey, no one gives a fuck about the Kentucky Wildcats. They don't. But I didn't have time to think about this, right? Because it was my turn to go on stage. So I make the long trek to the microphone, and I say to the sea of people in front of me, hi, I'm candidate number 273. My name is Shalini Parekh. I have my bachelor's degree in biology, and I'm from Lexington, Kentucky. Go Cats! And silence, except for my father's applause. Yes. As I made my way back to my seat, I could just imagine the nickname everyone was giving me, Cat Lady. Yeah. So once everyone had a chance on the stage, the next step was that we were supposed to list the 3 people that we wanted to meet. And we did this by filling out these blanks on these forms. And so, for instance, one of mine said number 273 would like to meet number 54. Do you accept? Check yes or no. And if it was a match, Tinder style, they would then be taken to one of hundreds of pairs of folding chairs in the corner where they had 15 minutes to talk. Face to face, there was an egg timer by each pair of tables. So that's how they were doing this. And so we gave our sheets of paper to these volunteers whose jobs it was to disseminate these to everyone. So we waited, and sure enough, a volunteer came by and said, who is number 270? And the guy next to me kind of nervously raised his hand, and the person said, congratulations, number 54 would like to meet you. And he took the sheet and checked in the candidate book on who it was, and checked yes, and he was led off to his chair with his person. And this is really how it went. And every time somebody from our table of 10 would be led off, I'd give them a big thumbs up, and I'd wait. And I'd wait. And I waited, yeah, and I started to worry, yeah. But I thought, okay, maybe no one put me down as their top 3, it can happen. But I put 3 guys down as my top 3, so it was just a matter of me waiting for them to respond. And sure enough, a volunteer came over and said, who is number 273? And perhaps a little too eagerly, I went, that's me. And I looked at it, and sure enough, it was a guy that I had reached out to. And he had checked no. Yeah, uh-huh. And about 20 minutes later was when shit got real. Because I looked around my table of 10, and I was the only one sitting at this table because everyone else was off talking to their paramour. And as I sat there eating, self-medicating one Tic Tac at a time, it hit me that it was less about me being at this alien Twilight Zone event and more about me being in this sea of singles being rejected by people of my own ethnicity. And it just really sucked. And that was over soon enough, and the next event was the organizer got on stage and invited people to come on stage and share what they thought of the event. And I thought, finally, oh my God, we can talk about how freaking dehumanizing this was. how this should never, ever happen again. And sure enough, there was a line of people. And so the first person gets there and says, hello, I just want to thank everyone because I found my life partner today. And they were not the only one, people. There were others, and there were parents and people who came up and talked, and people who said that they, maybe didn't find their person, but had a great time and would come next year. And I didn't get on stage, but if I had had the mental fortitude, this is how I imagine it would have gone if I did. I would have come on stage and said, hi, I'm candidate number 273. What the hell was that today? That should never, ever, ever happen again. I get that you have good intentions, but I do not have any intentions of coming back. I did not end up meeting my partner in the past 5 hours. You may have won today, Indian Matrimonial Conference, but I will leave today feeling freer than I ever have in my entire life. And then I'd look up at my father and say, Dad, let's go watch the UK game. Thank you. My mama told